Hello. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure being here. So as Nate said, my name is Jessica Moon, and I'm the creative director at an experience design company that's actually located on the street, a couple blocks away, called Digital Telepathy. All right. So today's talk is around change with no expectations. And basically, I want to begin by asking you something. I want you to think of a time when you attempted change in your life and actually had nothing come of it. And so maybe you went on that diet or decided to go to the gym a couple times a week, you know, with the expectation of wanting to lose some weight or looking a little better, and you didn't actually get those things happen, you know, so didn't lose any weight. Or maybe you wanted to try a new skill set because you wanted a new job somewhere, and so you spent nights and weeks trying to learn something new, and then you applied for that job only to not get it. So related to that, I actually wanted to do a little listening activity. I wanted you guys to all listen to this piece. It's around 30 seconds. It's basically a classical piece that I really enjoy. Let's see. All right. So the piece that you just heard, for those of you who don't know it, is Piano Concerto No. 2. It's by a composer named Sergei Rachmaninoff. And if you don't know who Sergei Rachmaninoff is, or you haven't heard this piece, it is by far one of the most influential and inspiring romantic classical pieces of all time. It is something that has gone into pop songs, into movies and TVs, and it's an inspiration and a muse to authors and artists and many people alike. It's definitely been this thing that has influenced not only the music world, but our world as a whole. But the interesting thing is that there was something that came right before this piece, and that is Rachmaninoff's Symphony No. 1. So Sergei Rachmaninoff, before this piece and before his Symphony No. 1, was a pianist. He was a very successful pianist. He was well known and was wonderfully talented. And he had decided to go through a change in his life and expand his career into composition and become a composer. And at some point, before this piece, he was writing piano-centric pieces, and this was his first symphony. This was his first attempt at change. And he went into it with the expectation of hoping to expand his musical career and to really evolve himself being a composer. So that night, he had this piece. It was going to debut in the world, and two things. One is that the orchestra that was tasked to play it didn't have enough preparation time to do so. And then the second thing, is that the conductor who was tasked with leading this performance for this world debut was drunk that night. Yeah, so you can imagine that the performance was not exactly that stellar hit that Rachmaninoff had hoped it would be. As a matter of fact, let me read you one of the critics' remarks. If there were a conservatory in hell, and if one of its talented students were to compose a program symphony based on the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt, and if he were to compose a symphony like Mr. Rachmaninoff's, then he would have fulfilled his task brilliantly and would delight the inhabitants of hell. In other words, this symphony was so good that it would have made great entertainment for people in hell. You can imagine that from this kind of critique, as well as many others that came that night, that it was a little bit of a downer for Rachmaninoff. So Rachmaninoff attempted to change. He wanted to write his first symphony. And in fact, here are some of the initial outcomes that came from that. Clearly, he had a failed world debut, incredible shame within his peer circles. He was pretty much walloped by the critics. And he suffered deep clinical depression. He had severe writer's block. He didn't write anything after this piece. And I guess you could say, in a way, he, with all these things, went on a forced hiatus. And yet, sometime after that, he made Piano Concerto No. 2. He made the piece that you just heard. And this piece, as I said, is one of the most influential romantic classical pieces of all time. So in that initial experience, he took that, and through those years, and with this therapist, he ended up writing this piece, which is an homage back to that time. Which leads me to the point of today's talk, which is change with no expectation. So I had asked you from the start of this to think of a time that you had tried to change in your life, but you actually didn't get that change that you wanted. The expectations you had set didn't actually come about. And this theme is really around the idea that when you change, you really shouldn't go into it with expectations. And that's because oftentimes, especially when we fail our expectations, we're not encouraged again to try to change. And we're afraid, or we're not motivated, we're demotivated, we're demoralized, and we don't want to try it again, you know? Why? Since you failed. But the fact of the matter is that whether you succeed or fail in this experience that you try, that through this accumulation of experiences, that eventually down the line, it'll lead to things that you never imagined possible. And in Rachmaninoff's case, it was Piano Concerto No. 2, and his successful career that came then after. So I'm gonna share with you some stories about my personal life, as well as the kind of perspective that I have going into change. And it's three really simple things. The first is to change, to create moments of change for yourself. Really simple, whether the opportunities come your way or whether you yourself seek them out, to always find these opportunities of change. Step 2 is what I just mentioned earlier, which is to expect nothing when in these moments of change. Just go into them. You can have goals, but just don't have any expectations of success or failure. And then step 3 is ultimately to recognize and appreciate the accumulation of experiences that come from them. Now, before I start with this, I do also want to mention that as I go through these stories, I hope that you'll also think of some times when you experience change as well, and maybe had, in retrospective, come across these great experiences from that event. So recently, I had just published a Skillshare class on being faster in design workflows via good Photoshop tricks, techniques, habits, and so on and so forth. And for those of you who don't know what Skillshare is, it's this online site that allows you and me to be able to post courses. They're like less than an hour. And with that, you can learn them, and you can just learn something new, and it could be anything, actually, not just design. And the interesting thing is that this course is about really enforcing good habits to make you become a better ideator, to get more creative faster with design. And a lot of it is centered around Photoshop, but I didn't actually learn Photoshop for design. In fact, I have a confession to make. I'm a bit of a nerd, and I really like video games. And so this has been with me all my life. I've really liked video games all my life. And as a matter of fact, when I was in high school, I wanted to become a video game designer, whatever that was. I really didn't know what it was. I just wanted to make the things that I enjoyed and wasted so much of my time playing, right? So I had somehow, in my exploration of figuring out this career path, learned that, okay, people, they learn how to paint digitally, and then they post their work on portfolio sites, and then talent recruiters randomly swoop in and then offer them a job at a design company. So I was like, cool, I can do that. I could definitely do that. So I'm gonna go and learn Photoshop, and from learning Photoshop, I'm gonna paint some things, put them on a portfolio site out there. At that time, DeviantArt was all the rage. And so I put it on DeviantArt with the expectation of wanting to get a job as a video game designer. Well, so this is what happened. I learned how to paint, and then I put up my site on DeviantArt, and I got virtually no recognition. The view count that's there at the bottom of the screen, it was in less than the double digits. It was really sad and pretty demoralizing. And I guess you could say that from that, I didn't become a video game designer. No one really called my number as much as I waited. And that was pretty much the end of that career path. But I did learn Photoshop in the end. And little did I know that at that time, that Photoshop, that ability to learn, that skill set that I picked up would carry into what was eventually the Skillshare class that I published related to what I do today as a creative director. So a couple years later, I actually had the good fortune of running a blog. And it's actually for the company I'm at today, Digital Telepathy. And this blog had around 5,000 monthly viewers a month, or yeah, monthly viewers. And in that, I basically just had to write some and try to grow it. Testing. All right, we're back. So yes, so to the point of 5,000 viewers, I did eventually in that time grow it to 200,000 a month on average. And that ultimately led to my ability to run a publishing division as editor-in-chief. And the interesting thing about this was that a lot of the success in this experience came from my ability to write. I had pretty good writing skills, and that was ultimately what led to some good content, which led to the success of this blog. But the writing skills did not come from this natural-born talent I had. As a matter of fact, it came from 4 condensed years of pain and suffering, as I wanted to be a sociology major, and so I pursued sociology. I wanted to help save the world and change the world and do something in my career path that would really impact, and so I became the sociology major, and if you know anyone who's gone down this path, you know they write a lot of papers. I wrote a lot of papers, and that eventually honed in this skill for me to write. And so I got pretty good at writing, and essentially in this degree that I had and in this experience, I really got to understand how to better solve social problems, which was inspirational and amazing. And then, like I said, I had honed these excellent writing skills. But when I graduated, I was unemployed for a very long time. I couldn't find any jobs, and I guess you could say that those 4 years and that debt just completely went down the drain. And I didn't actually get to start a career around something related to sociology. But eventually, when this opportunity to run the blog came around, I was able to tap into those skills that I got from this experience and was able to foster this great community that would visit our blog regularly. And I have to say that one of the things that still stays with me is that during that experience, every now and then people would reach out to me and tell me about how influential and wonderful the content was, that the quality of the content, the writing was so good, and that it made this profound impact, you know, in their lives or in the companies that they worked at. And I'm really proud of that. Okay, so here's another story about a time that I advocated for support for disaster relief. So a couple years ago, there was an earthquake and tsunami incident in Japan which is called the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. And this illustration you see before you is an illustration that I made. What had happened was I really wanted to support this cause, but I didn't have very much money to support it. And so I thought I'd make an illustration and raise some money and then donate all that to the Red Cross. In this experience, I just went into it wanting to raise more than what I had in my wallet. And I did that. That was definitely an additional outcome. But what's more interesting is that in that time, people started to reach out to me and ask me if they could use the artwork that I made to help uplift and project their own fundraising campaign efforts. And so I would get requests for having this art become something on a t-shirt or in the cover of a concert book for a concert that was being put on, or I think even one time, so I had someone ask me to make them playing cards with this thing on it. And so, but ultimately, I just kept getting these requests to have this art become a symbol for their own campaign fundraising efforts. And it was very humbling and very amazing. And eventually even, I was reached out by a group that wanted to showcase artists and art that was about graphic advocacy. And in that, this museum exhibition went around with this art. My poster was featured in that, and it went international, and then eventually got published in a book. Went into this thing just wanting to raise a little bit more money than what was in my wallet, and came out with that. And to this day, people still buy that poster, and it's been 4 to 5 years later. And that leads me to this slide, which is a slide meant to be filled out in the future, because right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm trying to undergo a new type of change. And that is the interesting desire to speak in front of people and share my experiences. Thank you. Um, I'll be honest. I have no idea what to expect with all this. As I attempt this change, other than the fact that it's going to lead me to more experiences and growth in my life. And I'll share with you what's happened so far. So, my attempt to change is to get in front of people, you guys, and to share these experiences that I have. And so far, recently I actually did a live stream event for an online conference that Adobe had to demo a new product that they just released last week. And the most recent thing is talking in front of an audience, which is you guys, at a Creative Mornings. And so I'm going to just keep going about my life, and I'm going to keep this perspective. I'm going to keep doing these three things, and that is to create moments of change in yourself by finding them or letting them come to you and seeking them out and trying them, expecting nothing, absolutely nothing, when going into these moments, and then ultimately appreciating the accumulation of experiences that'll come from it. And I hope that when you walk away today, you go back to work or go back to your lives, that you'll start thinking about the change that happened both in the past and the change that you might want to think about doing but you haven't done yet, and be encouraged by the fact that all of those opportunities will lead to experiences that'll ultimately create great outcomes in your life. Thank you.